Hi, everybody. My name is Shobhit Gupta, and I'm head of product for AWS Entity Resolution. AWS Entity Resolution helps you to match, link, and enhance consumer records across disparate channels and applications. AWS Entity Resolution provides you rule, machine learning, and provider-based matching capabilities. Today, we're going to focus on provider-based matching capabilities, which spans across LiveRamp, TransUnion, and Open Framework UID 2.0. These different integrations helps you to achieve a better consumer view with enhanced records, at the same time a set of advertising IDs that helps you to go and create advertising campaigns in the DSP provider of your choice. Today, this process takes weeks of development time. And what you're going to learn in the demo today will help reduce all this development time to a few clicks. And for walking over the demo specifically around UID 2.0 today, we have Jaime Nash in the room, who is Director of Product Marketing at the Trade Desk. And we also have Punit Shah in the room, who is the Senior Solutions Architect with AWS Entity Resolution. With that, let's get started. So Jaime, tell us a little bit about UID 2.0 and how is it an open framework?
Sure, and thank you so much for having me, Shabbat. So UID 2, or Unified ID 2.0, is an email or phone number based identifier that's built with double encryption and cross-functional opt-outs. So this makes it an upgrade to traditional identifiers used for identity and first-party activation across the programmatic ecosystem. And what makes this an open framework is the open source availability of UID 2.0. That means that anyone in the advertising ecosystem, whether you're an advertiser, a publisher, a data or a measurement provider, a DSP or an SSP, can access and use UID 2s for programmatic activation and use cases. And because it's so ubiquitous and accessible to anyone in the ecosystem, we have an opportunity to upgrade identity across the entire open internet with better, more durable identifiers.
Thank you, Jaime. So I also read that UID 2.0 is free of cost, right? Which just makes it easier for customers to use it.
That's exactly right. Because it's an open source solution, there's no cost to any participant in the ecosystem that wants to generate UID 2s or send them to partners for activation and measurement.
Got it. And today, I'm assuming customers need to go and integrate with APIs. Like, what do customers do today to use UID?
So today, to use Unified ID 2.0s inside of AWS, there is some development work required. You need to integrate some data. Sometimes you need to generate some computing resources. And you also need to maintain the fidelity and quality of your customer records and your UID 2 audiences. So there can be both time and cost associated to maintaining and using UID 2s today in AWS.
Very interesting. So I can really imagine a customer who is using AWS Entity Resolution's rule-based matching or machine learning-based matching to deduplicate their data, improve the data quality of their data, and then really going and generating the instead of UID 2.0 for creating an advertising campaign.
Yes, that's exactly right. It spans use cases across audience segmentation, attribution and measurement, audience matching and activation, so it can really facilitate and upgrade what you're doing with traditional identifiers today.
Perfect. Awesome. So before I give a top line of what this demo is going to be, let's talk about a customer example. So let's just take a fictitious company that you can give a good demonstration of, which is a best customer for using UID 2.0.
Great. So let's say, for example, you're a luxury skincare brand. You sell your product direct to consumers online, also across physical retail stores around the country. And you've spent a lot of time building up your first-party data footprint through transaction data, purchases on your site, loyalty programs, newsletter signups. Now that you have a trove of first-party data, perhaps you've decided to switch it up and store that data in AWS for better management, segmentation, and portability. So advertisers can use AWS Entity Resolution to not only generate UID 2s, but then send those UID 2s to different endpoints for activation with the partners and platforms that are most important to their workflows today.
Very interesting. Awesome. So now let's switch a little bit to Punit giving us a demo, but let me tee up the demo a little bit for our audiences. So in the demo today, what you would see is you will see three major steps that Punit is going to take to convert PII information into UID 2.0 IDs. Number one, Punit will start off by pointing us to the data source, which is sitting in Amazon S3. Second, Punit is going to create a matching workflow with UID 2.0 as the chosen and preferred matching technique, so that our systems knows what to generate. And third, Punit is also going to point to what's the data output location where we'll generate the set of UID 2.0 to go and undergo the activation scenario. With that, over to you, Punit.
Thank you, Shobhit, and thank you, Jaime. As part of my demo, as Shobhit explained, we'll take any company who already has the skincare brand, who already has data in S3. Now, in order for them to generate these UID 2.0s on their data, the first step is they, of course, come to Entity Resolution, the landing page. Out there, they'll see one of the options is schema mappings. Now, the first step for them to do is create a schema mapping. This is essentially informing the service that this is how my data shape is. These are all the different attributes that I have, and what would I like to use in order to encode them into UID 2.0. Now, in order to create a schema, we go to the schema mapping. We start by creating and giving it a name. So I say UID2 demo as an example. Next, we go to the Glue database. Since the data is already in S3, we assume that it's been crawled, represented as a Glue table. So that's kind of the starting point into the service. We choose the appropriate Glue database where the data resides. Next, we define the unique ID column. So for every record that's there in the system, this particular attribute identifies every record uniquely in the source. Next is the matching column. So this is the column that we'll use to encode into UID 2.0. This could be an email or a phone number. I'll just choose email as an example here. Besides the matching column, the system also offers flexibility where I can support multiple pass-through columns. What pass-through columns means are they do not participate in the encoding process, but they do show up on the output side. So when service writes the output along with those UID2 tokens, what additional columns would you want so that you can then use that output for any kind of activation down use cases?
Such as like segment ID and so on and so forth.
Segment ID, it could be just even your additional PI attributes like name, address, age.
Yeah.
I'm just going to, for simplicity's sake for this demo, I'm just going to select all my input columns to show up on the output side as well. And I hit next. Now, since I just chose email as my input field, I'm going to map it to something that the service understands. Of course, it's email here, so it's very well spelled out, but even if it's spelled differently, you're just informing the service that this particular column maps to something called as email address that the service now knows how to interpret. We hit next, we keep going all the way through to the last step, which is review and create. We get an opportunity to just take a look at all the settings we've done. If everything looks great, let's just go ahead and create a schema. So that's the first step. Now that the schema is created, of course, the next one is to create that encoding workflow where we want to translate the emails to a UID 2.0. We start by creating a matching workflow. We give it a name. Next, we choose again the data source input. We choose the UID2 appropriate schema. Lastly, on this particular page, we see the IAM permissions. We let the service create a new IAM role for us. If you already have an IAM role, you can very well use that as well. The IAM role essentially allows the service to make those API calls on your behalf to UID2 to get the right encoding done, as well as the read-write permissions for your S3 location. As I hit next, on my matching technique, one of the options we now see is provider services. I'm going to select that. Amongst the different providers supported, I'm interested in the Unified 2.0 as I want to convert my PI into UID 2.0. The service checks whether my AWS account is subscribed to this service. Since in this case it is, I hit next.
Okay.
Lastly, I provide the output location of my S3. That is, where would I like the service to write the output to? So I choose an S3 path on my account. As I keep scrolling down, we see the three additional UID 2.0 output schema elements that would be appended to the output file. They are the advertising ID, the salt bucket ID, and the identifier itself. And also, as I keep scrolling further down, we see that all the input columns that I had used also show up on the output. So if you recollect, during the schema mapping, we had those pass-through columns. They all show up on my output side as well. Since all of this looks great, I hit next. Again, last step of review create. I go through all my configurations. Everything's great. Let's just go ahead and click create and run. Now, this is going to submit the workflow where the system is going to read the data from that S3 location, pick up those emails, send it out to the UID2 service at the backend, get the output generated back from that UID2 service, append it with the other pass-through columns, and finally land the output into your S3 location of choice. Now, this may take a couple of minutes to run. In the meantime, let's look at something that I previously ran so that we can look at how the output shapes up. I'm going to switch to Athena. I have this query open up here. I'm going to run that query. And here we see the result. As expected, we have those three UID2 related schema elements on the output side. So we see the UID2 bucket ID. If I keep scrolling, I see the UID2 advertising ID and also the UID2 identifier. Alongside those three column elements, we also see the other additional PII elements that were part of my pass-through that I generated as part of my schema. So this is the output that the service generates. Now with this output, of course, I can take this for any kind of activation or other use cases that this is more applicable.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Punit. I think we just showed Jaime, as you could see in this example, that we took something that could have taken weeks to just with a few clicks, right? And customer is now in the possession of the UID 2.0s. Tell us a little bit about how will customer use this UID 2.0? Like what are the downstream use cases that customer will use it for and so on?
Yeah, absolutely. So once those UID2s are generated in your AWS Entity Resolution instance, you can connect them directly through an endpoint to your DSP of choice. There are several DSPs integrated with Unified ID 2.0, which means you can onboard those audiences for targeting, expansion with cross-device, activation across channels, including CTV, and then you can work with the partners of your choice, including partners that also work inside of AWS Entity Resolution for measurement and attribution. So now you've got closed loop targeting and measurement, all with a more durable, more specific identifier.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Jaime, for your time today. And thanks a lot, Punit. Let me summarize this for everybody watching the video, what all we learned today. Today, we learned about three things. Number one, what is AWS Entity Resolution and how it helps you to match and link your consumer records. Number two, how do you work and effectively create UID 2.0s using AWS Entity Resolution within a few clicks. And three, how to use UID 2.0 across the DSP of your choice. Thank you.